right, hello.
How are you doing today?
This is Mark and Tony, and today we're going to be talking about, as it's getting colder, how do you try and heat your coop or prepare the chickens for the colder weather at times?
And that can be a pretty tough subject sometimes, and most people want to close their coop up and put all this heat in there, and
Central heat and air.
central air and heat, you know. And I even saw a picture where they had a chandelier hanging from the center of the coop. We do kind of go over the top with our pets many times, but the chicken doesn't really require all of that. And before we kind of get into what they need, we probably ought to talk about just the coop itself, maybe.
Yeah, let's talk about the perimeter. First thing I want to mention is it is a dirty, dusty environment. Even if you hire a full-time maid for your coop, it won't be bad, but they're always producing feathers and dust and dirt, and that is, talk about the most explosive environment. It's like a...
Well, they do have full-time. Those are called children.
Oh, yes.
And grandkids.
Those are old-time kids, not these newer kids.
Okay.
Got to take away their phone to...
Yeah, you got to take that phone away from them. They won't do anything.
Yep.
But we're not really picking on you guys, you know, you kids. Someday you're going to be adults and you're going to be supporting me, so please forgive me for that.
So the first thing I want to talk about is the biggest risk for the hens is at nighttime. They're sleeping, they're resting, and that's when it's the coldest weather of all. There's two main things I'm gonna bring up as first points. For the roost that the birds are on, a lot of people like to use just like a round, this is plastic, but a wooden board, and the chicken's feet naturally grab around it. The negative with that is, as the hen squats, her toes are exposed to the cold weather. So if you're dealing with really cold weather, you're better off with a good old 2x4. Put this down, the hen's foot sits flat, and then as the hen sits on top of the foot, they keep their entire foot warm, because there's two real main things that will get frostbite on a hen. The feet is one, and then the comb is the other.
It's got to be pretty cold, though, for a chicken to get frostbite. I mean, they can tolerate temperatures all the way past 32 degrees.
Yeah. I don't recommend doing any heat at all, at least down to freezing, and maybe even getting down closer to zero. The hens are like little bitty ovens with a down coat. They're fluffy and ready for, perfect for that kind of conditions.
Well, before we start talking about heating the coop, because there is a point where you may have to heat your coop. Down here in Texas, we only wish sometimes we had to heat our coop. But we have just natural heat from God himself, 24/7, 365 days a year. And that's really no joke sometimes. But the coop itself, during the winter time, wind is not your friend. Certainly with birds and your pets, your dogs, your cats. But we're talking about chickens today. And so we have a tendency to want to keep our birds inside the coop, which is fine on very, very extreme cold days. They'll probably want to be in there anyway. But to winterize that coop is something that we all need to understand, that wind is not your friend. And so the first thing you can do is putting up an appropriate wind block. You can do that in the form of shrubbery around the coop if you have a stationary coop. You can do it with tarps, industrial grade plastics.
In the old days, just lean a piece of plywood against that, but that's twice the cost of the coop, so can't do that.
That's true,
Get a mortgage.
I just bought a piece of plywood the other day. That a quarter, actually it was a 3/8 inch. Guess how much I paid for BC 3/8 inch plywood?
I bet it was $35.
Oh, double.
No way.
$70. $70. Now, I did find it cheaper, but I still didn't get it any less than $50. So that same piece of plywood about 2 years ago was about $21. So we're kind of getting off track here a little bit.
Now, the important thing, you want to do something just to prevent that draft, and that draft up near the roost is the worst, because the hen's sleeping, and if there's a cold minus 20 degree wind blowing over the girls, that's how they're going to get frostbite and die.
But we do need ventilation in
Absolutely.
the coop. But ventilation and a drafty coop are not the same thing. Tony's talking about a draft where you just got a coop that leaks holes like an old antique hunting cabin. We're talking about a
Wind is blowing through your
yeah,
hair.
blowing through your hair. We're talking about a controlled ventilation where you actually have a slot that you can adjust or a window that you can crack or something like that. Ventilation is important, but a draft that can really harm your birds in many different ways. Certainly on a humid day, and we'll get into that here in a little bit.
Yeah. And ventilation is kind of like your house. If your house is too sealed up, it gets stuffy and just not comfortable. The hen house is 50 times worse because the hens are pooping all over the place, and that's creating some fairly dangerous gases that you want to be able to exit. And so you want some ventilation up top, you want a little bit of ventilation down low. And in fact, if you look at our doors, at the hinge we leave a small gap, and that's a perfect little bottom ventilation that just lets a little bit of air in or out as needed to help that air exchange happen.
Absolutely, and those gases, Tony, can be so dangerous that it not only makes your birds sick, but it can make you sick when you go in and clean the coop. I was looking on the internet, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, and I came across a thing where a man's wife almost died just cleaning the coop out from the gases, and she was rushed to the emergency room. Fortunately, she was okay, but these gases that can build up in these coops who aren't properly ventilated can be extremely dangerous to humans as well as birds themselves.
And it's good to have and every coop's different. If you do a bedding, whether it's shaved wood shavings or some other type of material, some people use sand, but some kind of a flooring that, from time to time you want to change it out and clean it, obviously.
Well, that straw and the wood shavings will actually act like an insulating blanket for the floor. So that's part of your winterization on your coops. If you have a wooden floor coop, is to put that straw down or those wooden shavings, because it will keep your coop. Some of the thermal heat from the earth will help warm your coop.
Well, part of it also is as the hens are walking around throughout the day, that shavings is fairly soft, and while it could still be cold, it's not as much of a heat transfer to the feet. Whereas if you're on cement or even a plywood, there's going to be a lot more heat transfer compared to the other materials in there.
Now, what's the biggest question we get concerning water during the winter time?
Well, it's how do you keep the water from freezing?
Water from freezing. And all I can
Great
say
question.
is that good luck.
I say move to Texas. It's a lot better.
Yeah, move to Texas. It is a lot better. Blowtorch works.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of heaters that you can plug in. And so there are fancier ones and simpler ones. One thing I don't recommend is if you're going to do your own kind of a water heating system, electricity and water are not good things to put together. Just keep that in mind.
That's true, but they do make Tony one of those little pet heating plates.
Yeah, they make for chickens, for dogs, for some different creatures.
And those are plug-in appliances, but they're UL approved, and they do pretty well in the coop. And I would those of you that live in those extreme environments where you do have problems with your water, I'm talking below 32 degrees for 6 months at a time. You might want the Arctic Circle, anything other than Texas. But you might want to invest in one of those little heating platforms. Many of you guys have asked us if we would make something like that. And be quite frankly with you, yes, we can, but it doesn't make much sense because you can go buy one of those things probably cheaper than we can make it and sell it to you. When they make these things, they make them millions at a time, and they've really got the cost down. So I would encourage you to, if you live in one of those environments, to buy one of those. I don't want to call it a hot plate because it's not really that. It's specifically for pets, and it's like a pet warming tray.
Yeah. And something else, that warmer for heating the water can also be enough heat for most people to heat the coop as well. I've seen some of these where they'll have a 300 watt heater they drop in the water, and 300 watts, that gets expensive. Look at your electric bill.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Might get the water kind of hot too.
Yeah. Well, no, it doesn't.
Oh.
When it's minus 30 degrees and you drop 300 watts, it's keeping the water at, 50 degrees.
Oh, okay.
But you're heating the whole coop, and that's a good way of doing it.
That's true. It is a good way to do it. As long as you don't run out of water.
Well, yeah, that could be an issue. One thing you don't want to do for heating your coop is anything with an open flame or a filament or element
Like a heat lamp.
that Imagine putting chicken feathers and dust on it and them heating up and bursting into flame, so they fall off the heat lamp, they fall to the nicely pine shade floor, and your coop gets a lot warmer really fast.
Oh, it does.
And roasted chicken's on the menu for
Chickens will be good for about 30 seconds. Then you have chicken on the half shell, basically.
Yeah.
But those of you who, most of us, we don't want to burn our coop down. Most of us do use pine shavings or straw for the floor year round, certainly during the winter time. And I know a lot of you guys out there say, I've been using a heat lamp for years and never had a problem. Well, you don't have a problem till you have a problem. And
it happens
so fast.
You don't want your coop next to your house.
We've been selling this door for well over 10 years now, and I've had quite a few calls about really tragic things about my coop caught on fire last winter. I was using a heat lamp, or I had a propane heater in there for the birds, and those are pretty tragic calls. But
one more thing with anything that's corded that you plug in, if the birds are pecking on it or a mouse starts chewing a wire, that could cause a short.
Sure can.
And give you an electrical fire from that. So
yeah, and the other thing is, Tony, is that as we get into these colder weathers, birds aren't like humans. They can adjust. And the biggest issue that birds have as far as adjusting is when you, like in Texas, we go from 85, which is going to be like today and tomorrow, to 32 degrees in a matter of 24 hours. And the birds really don't adjust that fast. Their feathers keep them warm. They got to have time for those plumes to grow. If you watch your cat or your dog, you'll see how the hair comes out during the wintertime. Well, the chickens aren't much different, and that's how they keep their bodies warm.
Except there are some breeds of chickens, like the naked neck ones. Well, they're ugly.
That's just wrong saying it like that.
But that's what they're called, the naked necks.
No.
And those are the birds that, and if you want entertainment, they'll make like little scarves for their hens.
Oh no! Well, they make diapers for them too. So
yeah.
If you're using diapers on your chickens, I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend you, but it is funny.
But for anything that doesn't have the feathers on a substantial part of the body, that's something to watch for. And of course, younger birds are much more vulnerable to even 50-degree weather, let alone freezing weather.
Yeah.
Something else I've seen is where there'll be a pad that might be a foot or so in size, and it's just a heating pad, and you just put it on the floor of the coop, and the chickens can walk across it and enjoy some of that heat off of that.
And that's a really great way to keep your chicken warm, and the chicken can actually decide to actually when they need heat and when they don't need heat.
Yeah.
So birds aren't much different than us as far as regulating their body temperature. Like my wife, she wears a coat in 80-degree weather, and her hands are cold all the time.
75.
75, yeah. And her hands are cold all the time. It's just the way God made her. Me, I can walk around in shorts all the way down to 45-degree weather. I'm okay. Well, birds are kind of the same way. Some need more heat than others. So with the heating pad that Tony's suggesting, those that feel like they need it, they'll hang around the heating pad. And those that don't, they'll just be all over the place. So it's a good idea to let your bird decide when it needs heat and when it doesn't need heat. And that brings up my other question, Tony, is that there's been a lot of discussion about when do you heat your coop? At what temperature?
So my guidance normally is when you get down to 0 and below, that's when I'd start looking at something for heating the birds.
And that's exactly right.
Yeah, freezing, even 10 degrees, as long as it's not drafty, and they're adult hens, and not naked. You gotta have all these parameters, because someone will come back and yell at me about it.
And everything that I've researched in my own experience is that if it's 32 degrees, they don't need heat. I mean, that's like a nice sunny day today.
Yeah, at 30 degrees, their hens are still out running around doing their thing. Now, one thing I'll add to that is when you get down to the 0 degrees and really, really cold weather, the hens aren't going to be outside really much at all. You're probably in an area with snow and ice and so forth. And one thing to factor in is with all of your hens confined to the coop, they're going to be grumpier with each other. Yeah. So you want to have at least 4 square feet of space in your coop per hen. It'd be nicer if you had more. It depends on if you have like the Jersey Giants, they could use twice as much space. but it depends to a degree on their attitude and the size of the hens and how well they get along.
Yeah, they will be confined during the wintertime. If they might even confine themselves to the coop. That 4 to 5 square feet per bird on an average is very critical, because if they start overcrowding, you ever heard of the pecking order? They'll start pecking at each other, and then there'll be damage to your birds and fighting and so on and so forth. But the Jersey Giants, like you said, they do require almost double the space. They're up to around 8 square feet per bird.
Yeah.
And then in the run, the Jersey Giants will require about 15 square feet per bird, whereas your standard birds would be probably around 8 square feet.
One thing I'll throw out there, if during the day you see 1 or 2 hens that are out a lot more than the others, they're probably the low hen on the pecking order.
Yeah, they are.
They're getting picked on in the coop, so they're kind of going outside where they're not being harassed as much. They're suffering in the cold, and maybe you can do something about that, maybe you can't, but get a therapist.
Yeah, get a therapist. Maybe we'll start a chicken therapy counseling session here one of these days. But
A little roost.
yeah, a little roost. Yeah, put them out there and just now you behave. Yeah. Yeah. But the birds they can be safe during the wintertime. You play an important role in keeping them safe during that. But don't overheat your birds.
One other thing I'll throw in there is feed. So one thing I've seen repeatedly is if you take crushed corn, what's it called, crushed corn, and give that to the hens, that helps them to produce a little more heat.
You can get that from scratch.
Yeah, you get some of that from scratch, but that's a better winter treat than as much summertime, because
Yeah, we'll talk about the summertime during spring. But,
yeah.
but right now we're pretty well focused on the wintertime, because wintertime's coming on, and you could end up with a very healthy flock, or you could end up coming into the spring with a very sick flock. And I would like to add one other thing, is that everything we're talking about, we've discussed so far, is considering it's a dry day. Now, if you have a wet, cold day, everything's different. You do not want your birds to get wet and cold at the same time. They will get sick and possibly even die. There is a vitamin that you can give your birds that we do not sell, but you can get on the internet. It's called chicken drench, and I promote this as much as I can. It's probably the easiest thing you can give your birds to assure their health and their safety. In case they do get sick, they can actually heal themselves. And the chicken drench is it's an additive that you put in your water. You can just Google it, or whatever your search engine is, and just put in chicken drench. You don't need a gallon of the stuff unless you're commercial, but a pint of it will go a long way. And just be diligent to put a few drops in their drinking water, and that will help them quite a bit get through the winter. If they do get sick, it will give their body enough energy to maybe fight it off. And so,
and in colder weather, the hens are normally going to drink less water than in summer, but they are going to eat
certainly
more
if it's
food.
frozen.
Well, definitely. Yeah, I've seen them picking on ice before. It's kind of entertaining.
That's got to give them a headache.
But they're going to eat more of the food,
Yeah.
because they've got to produce so much heat. So,
Well, that's all I got. There's probably a lot more to this winterization of your coop, but this will get you in the right direction to winterize your coop, and so you can have safe, productive birds coming into the spring. Nobody wants to start the spring with a sick flock or a dead flock where they got to start all over. So if you can manage your birds during the wintertime, you'll have a good spring and a good summer to come.
and that reminds me, I can't think of a single instance in the New Testament where Christ had to deal with snow. Now, he was the wisest man, of course he was God, and he chose to come to a place that didn't deal with snow. I think that's a good thing. That's why a lot of people are moving to Texas, or at least down south.
That caught me off guard, Tony.
Well, just
I gotta
sometimes
admit.
these thoughts come in.
Yeah, there is not much mention of snow. However, snow is mentioned in the Old Testament.
It is.
It is.
Yes.
And there's a book called something on a snowy day, and one of David's mighty fighting men was walking in the was just walking in the woods, and he came across a lion that was down in a pit, and he was stuck in the pit because it was snowy, it was icy, and the lion couldn't get out. Now, most of us would look in the pit and go, "Oh, lion, I'm glad you're there and I'm here," and walk on, but not this guy. This guy grabs his sword and jumps in the pit and kills the lion. Why? Because he could. And he went on to be David's bodyguard. There's a lot of really cool stories like that in the Bible, and I would encourage all of you guys to read the Bible and read it with an understanding and wanting to know the truth. I know I tell you that every time we do these videos, but I know so many people in our churches that claim to be Christians, and I'm sure they are, but they don't ever read their Bible with an idea of discovering the truth. They just want to listen to what people tell them what to believe, and hopefully that they're being told correctly. But we all have agendas, and so I want to encourage all of you, myself included, to continue to search out the truth. And I know you're gonna find it.
Amen to that. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks.